Welcome to our training on when to worry about your kids' worries. My name is Corey Thompson, and I am the clinical director at Pleasant Psychology. I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for that, Corey. I am Ryan Griffus. I'm interning here at Pleasant Psychology this semester, and I'll be presenting with Corey today.
So, we're just going to start by telling you a little bit about Pleasant Psychology and our team. So, at Pleasant Psychology, our owner is Dr. Madison Chapman, then myself, which I already introduced, Ryan, which is our awesome counseling intern. We have a psychiatric physician assistant, Norman Curtis, our billing administration, which is Sarah Belfry. We have two LLMSWs, and then we also have two psychology doctoral students that are with us from CMU. Something that just kind of makes us a little bit different from other practices is our mission and vision. What we really stand out is so we serve children 2 to 18, and something that's really important to us is empowering families by collaboratively addressing emotional, behavioral, and academic needs. We primarily serve children with mild to moderate mental health concerns, and we address an array of problems. So we see kids who struggle with academic problems, anxiety, ADHD, suicidal thoughts, depression, family struggles, all sorts of things. And I think we just have a really amazing group of practitioners who have specialty in a variety of different areas. So I'm really excited to be working with you guys today and telling you a little bit about what we do and just sharing a little bit of information about anxiety and worry and hoping that we can answer some questions for you guys today.
So for today, we have several objectives, and when I started to look for sites to complete my practicum and internship at, it was an easy choice for me. Pleasant Psychology and the clinical leadership of Dr. Madison Chapman and Corey as clinical supervisor here are coming up with innovative things such as this lunch and learn that we're discussing today. We have some objectives that we want to accomplish, and the plan is to have more of these come about that are on acute topics that are concerning for parents of children who are, struggling with all of the things that Corey had mentioned previously. And for today's presentation, our objectives are to decipher basically when we as parents should start worrying about our children's worries. We as parents, caregivers, foster parents, those responsible for the children. And in this presentation today, our objectives are to understand the difference between what is healthy worry and what is anxiety that, and I'm going to probably mention this word a few times, debilitating for our children, that is a hindrance to their daily life. We want to talk about learning coping strategies for ourselves, but specifically for our children, how to support them and your whole family for that matter. We want to be able to recognize the red flags that might pop up, things that we can cite and recognize when they do occur so that we know these are things that probably should spur us into further action. And we also want to bring about an awareness of the abundance of resources in this community and surrounding communities for that matter. What Pleasant Psychology can help with, specifically with services offered here, but also in referrals for your family as well, or your child specifically. And then ultimately, we want everyone to leave with a greater sense, an enhanced sense of confidence in themselves as ultimately your child's most close and strongest advocate. So there are different types of worry, and that might be subjective to all types of folks, right? Because we all have different definitions of things that, or things that we put at priority and that we stress about. more often. But what does it mean? What are we talking about today? The definition of worry is feeling uneasy or nervous about a problem or potential future problem. For us, we want to talk about how to recognize worry in our kids. And I'm just going to point out a couple, well, three specific, just general age groups. And when we talk about the young kids, our school age, on the younger side, maybe pre-K, K, even down to, as Corey mentioned, very young, 1, 2 years old, anxiety can exist, but it's going to manifest differently. In our young kids, we're going to have a lot of crying, overabundance of crying, and oftentimes inconsolable crying, temper tantrums, and just irritability, general irritability that maybe seems out of character or maybe not appropriate for the setting and scenario. And then sleeping patterns, when those are disrupted and we just can't get them back on track because they do occur with younger kids, they occur with everybody. But if it's prolonged and it's really just genuinely breaking up life for you, your child, your family, that's where we're going to be concerned. And also, when children start to manifest that anxiety through more violent or aggressive behaviors, such as breaking their toys or, harming others, we start to take concern at that point as well. And then when we talk about our upper elementary kids, they, as we start to bud onto adolescence, where we know a lot of changes are happening, but if that frustration and those changes become escalated to the point where they just can't shake out of it, and we can't necessarily talk them down from it, it might be time to tag someone else in or an outside resource. And also with those children, the linguistic abilities and the ability to articulate their feelings aren't yet fully developed. They might have a little bit better ability than our younger kids, but they're still probably going to manifest their anxiety in just physical ways. We're going to see them they're going to be sick to their stomach and, talking about their head hurting or being, their head feels like they're going to explode or all the things I think I've heard my kids say over the years when they're overly worried. Those physical type of complaints, if they're prolonged and frequent, then we start to pay attention to that as well. Maybe ask a few more questions or consult an outside resource. And then in teens, which is a very difficult age, regardless of anxiety, but you know, teens are social beings by nature, typically. Humans are, for that matter, but teens especially. And if they begin to isolate and aren't interested in social interactions, we might want to start to explore why, and maybe if there's something else behind that. And then again, though, sometimes they're just not wanting to or know how to. I've run into this often and frequently recently in a lot of teens that I come across where they either don't want to or don't know how to describe those feelings yet. And so they bottle it up and it again is going to manifest in, stomach aches and headaches and being overly tired and all the things. And as we talk about anxiety, we'll talk about racing thoughts and, they just can't slow their brain down as well. Still me. So, things that are common, and this is not an exhaustive list, so please don't take this as a do all end all. But we do have common worries, and there are things that although we as adults might not necessarily seem to be overly concerned with, we have to remember the frame of reference that our children are operating out of, and their worlds are much smaller. And so for our kids, simple things that we think are simple, bugs, dark, things that they've heard from other kids, like the boogeyman or the, made up types of things that we know certainly aren't there, but it's very real to them. And then, attachment becomes an issue. And so strangers, unfamiliar settings, loud noises, things that are startling to their physical surrounding and their awareness is going to create some type of anxiety, but not abnormal anxiety. And what we're talking about today is when we should worry when it becomes harmful to their daily functioning. Your upper elementary or middle school kids, they're beginning to start to explore their own identities a little bit, but they also still they still crave structure. So, when we get out of routine for them and we start to, they still are trying to find independence in the world, but they do still rely on us also. So they want to know that, you know, they're concerned with us being available for them, but they don't want to show that, right? They don't want to admit it because that's not cool. But they still will worry about that. Is somebody going to be there to pick me up? Am I going to be on time for school? All the things. And they're becoming ever increasingly more active in their social life. So they're worrying about their social groups, their peers, their friends, maybe some, we hate to admit it, but little budding romances and relationships that they think just are their whole world at that point, which again, given their frame of reference, certainly can be the case. And then, interfamilial issues, the discord, or I would say the uh, chaos that might occur in some homes will cause worry for everybody, certainly, and that goes for our children as well. Teens, they're starting a definite transition into what is soon to be adulthood, and so they're stressing. Which is normal. And we have to remind them that there is a lot of normalcy in these worries. So things like their school performance, athletic performance, excuse me, again, their social groups, relationships and their image and how they're perceived out in the world, especially in the days of social media that we're in, they become ever more important. So although, they crave that social interaction, again, we'll go back to when they start to draw away and isolate, we want to start to recognize that and know where they're at in developmental stages and what they crave. And if they're not at that point, we'd like to start digging, I think, and consult outside.
So I'm going to take this opportunity just to go through a couple of real life examples of what we would consider normal worries. So an example of a kid normal worry would be maybe dropping a kid off to daycare. And dropping a kid off to daycare, a typical worry would be maybe a kid clinging to you, they're crying, they're upset. You drop them off at daycare and they're still crying, right? They're clinging to you, they don't want you to leave. Daycare, you have to kind of pass them off. Your heart as a parent is sinking, but you drop them off and the daycare provider calls you a couple of minutes later, maybe 2 to 5 minutes later, and the daycare provider lets you know that, hey, your son or daughter is playing, they're fine, no more tears. That for a little child would be considered a very normal, healthy, common worry. Okay. For an upper elementary, middle school worry, that we would consider very normal is, we think about girls getting ready for picture day the night before. They might be pacing, they might be a little bit irritable. Maybe they're on their phone with their friends. They're just really frustrated. They want to make sure that they've got the right clothes. They're going to fit in tomorrow. They're really just not in a good mood, right? They're restless, going to bed the next morning. They're frustrated. They didn't get enough sleep. They're maybe a little bit snappy at their parents, at their siblings. But then when they come home from school, they are fine, right? It seems like everything is better because the situation has resolved itself. So it's not this long lasting worry, right? It's all over. So again, a very normal, common worry. Okay. So there's a resolution. Something with a teenager is maybe, and again, I know I'm kind of making this quick, but I'm hoping that you're seeing that with a common worry, what we would say is like an age appropriate worry, is that once there's kind of this resolution or we're able to work through something, the child is able to maintain age appropriate behaviors. And then with a teenager, we have a lot of kids that are worried about grades. So there might be some restless nights, maybe irritability, wanting to go after school for tutoring, focusing on grades more, getting a little bit upset. They want to get into college. They're frustrated. They maybe even get a little bit angry. But maybe once they achieve whatever it is that they're trying to achieve, whether it's a grade, a passing test, enrollment to a college, they kind of start to maintain those appropriate behaviors again. So, again, a very normal, appropriate worry or frustration based on what it was that they were trying to achieve or to overcome. Okay. And we're going to kind of show you the difference kind of between what we would consider these normal common worries versus when we start to become worried about actual anxiety. All right, so what is anxiety? So, anxiety, the definition is intense, prolonged worry that interferes with daily life and routine. And I think the biggest thing that I really want you to focus on is that anxiety has an actual interference. Okay, so when a worry has an interference with a person's daily routine, life structure, relationship, something of that sort, some part of their domain, that is when now we're not talking about worry anymore. We're talking about anxiety. So when there is an interference in a person's life, we are no longer talking about worry. And that's really the greatest difference of common normal worry and anxiety. This is a list of very common symptoms that you might see if you did a Google search or if you talked with other people. And I'll kind of just go through a few of them. I'm not going to go through all of them, but sweating, trembling, feeling like, something bad is going to happen to them, having an upset stomach, being really unable to control that worry, trouble concentrating, lots and lots of trouble sleeping. That tends to be kind of really, really common symptoms that we're seeing. These are a lot of the symptoms of anxiety that we are seeing in children here at Pleasant Psychology. So these are what I would say symptoms are the symptoms of the kids that are coming in on a daily basis for us. So again, trouble sleeping, avoiding situations and people, kind of, really to the extreme level of things. We have lots of kids, really dependent on age, but clinging to parents, caregivers. If you've heard of separation anxiety, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, lots of really, really extreme tantrums, fidgeting or having trouble concentrating. I like to tell parents that the A's are intermixed. So ADHD and anxiety can look very, very similar. We have a lot of parents that want to get tested for their children for ADHD, when in reality, it could be anxiety. They just look really, really common. Complaining of physical symptoms, we call those somatic complaints. Children with anxiety can have genuine physical ailments, headaches, stomach aches, just body pains, and they are actual physical pains that the child is feeling because their anxiety is so intense in their body. We're seeing a lot of perfectionistic characteristics, children that are needing constant reassurance from teachers, school personnel, daycare providers, other people in their lives, kids that are having to go to their bathroom more often. It's almost like their body is just telling them that something doesn't feel right. And so it's just this like hyper arousal kind of almost kind of like another physical ailment sort of thing. And then going mute and refusing to speak. We have several kiddos right now in our clinic where we're just working on getting them to actually use their verbal language skills because the anxiety is so intense that they have just actually refused to speak in general to people. So there's a study in Cleveland that I found that says 1 in 5 children will develop an anxiety disorder, which is really sad for me to hear because I know a lot of children, and 1 in 5 is not very many, and that 1 in 3 adolescents already struggles with anxiety, and that's just such a high number. And it has said that since COVID, that number has been even higher, unfortunately.
$1 million question. When do we start to worry? I know as a parent when I came downstairs and I had a child who was telling me, I'm so sick, I can't go to school. And we've all, if we've had children or cared for children, I think we've all probably, if we've been in those situations a few times, start to wonder, is this something, is this real? Is this what, am I being played? And you start to question yourself. And so you can develop anxiety based on, am I doing this right? Am I recognizing what I should be? Am I being a bad parent by not taking this seriously, or am I taking this too? Who knows, right? When do we start worrying, though? And for us, we're talking about situations where now you can even tag out, which is a beautiful option because for us as parents, sometimes it does feel very isolating, and we feel like some of the issues that we're facing are just isolated to our household. And I've learned very thankfully over the years that that's far from the truth. We all go through challenges and we all ask ourselves this question, when should I start to worry about this? And quite frankly, we've said it a couple times, Corey, just recently, that it's when it begins to interfere with their daily life. And Corey's example of whether or not a worry has a resolution, if they find a way out, that's probably our difference maker. So if we wake up day after day and our child is not able to come out of this, regardless of changing some things for them, increasing opportunities for them, talking more, giving them chances and space, and all the things that we think might help, but it's just not budging. There might be more here that we need to now consult outside and maybe have a new set of eyes on that or some additional support to help you decipher, is this something I should worry about? Um, Hopelessness is something I think right now, especially prominent. And as Corey mentioned, the intense need for perfectionism. I am familiar with the athletic world, so I will use a couple athletic analogies here, but please feel free to apply this to any role that your children play because I think it's applicable in a lot of situations. uh, when nothing seems to bring our children joy, the things that they have particularly enjoyed over the years or developed a love for and they were passionate about and really worked for and pursued, if they're just not interested anymore and it seems almost kind of like on a dime that they just pivoted and that's just something they don't want to do. And we just want to ask and explore what happened, or maybe why not? Not in a prying way, but try to, and certainly not in a way to guilt them, but we do want to understand whether this genuinely is something that they just fell out of love with, and that happens, of course. Or is there an outside influence or an internal influence that is making them just not want to get up and go to practice or get up and go to school or whatever the case is, that birthday party, the things that they just really love doing? Maybe we do need to start worrying about that if that stays persistent. If it's a one-time thing and they're just not feeling it, and as Corey mentioned, the next day they're bounced back and they're back to themselves. I'm ready to go back to school or practice or whatever. We probably, just had an off day. As I mentioned before, withdrawal from friends and family, we as human beings are social creatures. Certainly in adolescence and in childhood, we're trying to find that peer group and we're exploring different areas and testing our personalities with these friends and these potential friends. And so, but if we seemingly lose interest in that and watch our children lose interest in that, we definitely would like to understand, is this a temporary thing? Are you just kind of exhausted on people? Because we all get there sometimes. We all need a little bit of replenishment, and children are no different. They need that recharge time. Children can be introverts as well. Uh, Probably a lot less often, or maybe don't manifest it the same way, but certainly that's the case for some. And if, in our younger children, if they are just, they're not into it, and normal age appropriate play, as Corey mentioned previously, is just not in the cards. If they seemingly are more just kind of, um, you know, not active and not wanting to get up and move as children do, and um, that's just they're dormant. And certainly we want to do some exploration into that. I'm going to use an athletic analogy here, but I know a lot of, actually, I know personally, through my own experiences and my transition from this identity of, I was football was my thing, but certainly I'm working with and talking to a lot of young people right now who are identifying as I'm a I'm in the band, or I'm an excellent student, or I'm a baseball player. And that's where their sentence ends when they go to describe themselves. If those things transition, or they're no longer available to them, or they don't want to participate or feel they can't, they begin to now question their worth and their value intrinsically as a human, which is certainly concerning to us because the fact that they are an A student or in the band or an excellent baseball player is not their identity. It's a trait of theirs, or a point of their character, but it's not who they are. And so we want to definitely, first and foremost, remind them of that worth, but now maybe start to seek some services to support that message and help our children believe that of themselves. And on the opposite, I would say, side of this spectrum, we also have where our kids just become reckless and unconcerned for their well-being or the well-being of others around them. And that certainly can cause some concern as well, because first and foremost, their physical safety, we want to maintain that at all times. But if they just seem to not care anymore and are just taking part in, we'll say substance abuse or self-harming behaviors, things like that, that are just, and they seem to have an absence of concern for their own well-being. We now have to step in and certainly assert their well-being, their worth again, and their value, but also to try to mitigate the harm to them, number one, physically, but concurrently, right with that, their emotional well-being as well. And we've said it 1,000 times, but again, it's worth saying that all of these things, what we're talking about, is not just a temporary thing. If they lost a game or they had a bad day at school, but they go to bed and, they might do some crying and you might have to have a talk and stay up with them for a little while. But the next day, they're maybe not all the way back, but they seem to be improving, then that's temporary. But if it's just day after day and they're not breaking out of the funk, it's probably time to worry. And so what do we do with that? And I mentioned it before, but certainly it's important that we just are there, our presence alone. We're listening, we're open, we are not the information that is coming at us, we're allowing them to let that information come at us, whether it be the littles with their behaviors and they just need to, squeeze a pillow or scream or whatever they're doing. If they don't have the words, we're just there, making sure that they're safe while they're doing it, but letting them get that out because that certainly is a start, right? We want them to be able to express in whatever way comes natural at this point until we can teach them some healthier coping mechanisms. And I know I just had a talk actually. I'm going to stray far away from maybe telling you with whom, but I had a talk yesterday with a young person who believes, as a lot of young people do, that they are the only young person going through what they're going through right now. And so they're ashamed or embarrassed. And it's really important for us to say, absolutely not. And this is far more normal than you could ever imagine. Bringing them out of that space of isolation and maybe into a sense of, oh, okay, this is manageable. I'm not so different. People have gone through this and I can too. And it's okay to talk this through and get some help. And we want to just have them. We want to be their biggest advocate. And on our slide here it says teammate. I think again, I use a athletic analogy because that's just what comes natural to me. But we want to be their cheerleader. We want to, like I said, normalize things, but also like praise them for the bravery and the effort that it takes for them to come outside of their comfort zone, because that is very outside for a lot of kids. Normally, it's just, it's easier to just keep it inside and hope it goes away. But if they are willing to come out and talk about things that they feel are specific only to them, That's brave. And so we just want to celebrate that and be their biggest advocate in that moment. Um, this is a big one too. And this is important to me because, again, of a personal experience, but I think it's probably more common for most of us. We have all undergone challenges in our life. And I would argue that probably a lot of us, if not all of us, have undergone certain traumas in our life. That doesn't mean that those feelings that we have or have had and maybe overcome or learned how to cope with, that's not that doesn't match what your child is going through necessarily. They are your child, whether they're your foster child, your biological child, stepchild, grandchild, whatever the case may be, that is your child. But that doesn't mean they're you and they're not feeling the same feelings. So we just have to rid ourselves of our stuff, right? Because we carry stuff. And in those moments, it's about them. It's not about what we thought at that age or what our experiences were, because it's a totally different human and it's a totally different experience. And so when I talk about that, I'm talking about breaking the cycle because likely the things that we had endured, a lot of us were a result of what our parents had endured. And so there's this repeated cycle of maybe traumas or behaviors that have persisted. And for our children, they deserve a fresh start, right? They're their own person going through their own world, not our world and not the generations before us. And so it's very important for us to make sure that we are in a good space because we've all heard that it's cheesy. I'm sorry, but I'm just going to say it. You can't pour from an empty cup. We got to take care of ourselves. We have to make sure that we're healed so we can help our children heal. So a little bit, it's kind of repeating here, but again, it's just I think hopefully these points resonate. Safe space, judgment free, no reactions, just letting them get it out. And the things that they are telling us, we probably are going to react, right? But it's important for us, those reactions that we have, we can't express shock, we can't express disgust or whatever the reaction, that knee-jerk reaction is. This is their time to tell you or to show you. Like I said before, our youngers aren't going to be able to say, well, I'm just really struggling today, and yeah, I figure I could have a good talk now. They're gonna throw a toy and chew on a blanket, whatever it is they're gonna do because they're just so frustrated or anxious inside, and that's all they have. That's the way they're gonna talk it out. But we certainly can encourage them. We ask them questions, not prying and demanding questions, but just tell me how you feel or tell me more about that because I want to understand and let them know that they are priority at that point. We want them to be independent and we want them to be able to form coping mechanisms, but also be kind of there, supporting them and picking them up when they need that as well. And then certainly, no matter what, again, I think it probably goes along similarly with what I've already said, but the frame of reference for our children, especially the youngers, who their world might consist of oh boy, I almost said 6 or 7. Sorry for everybody who's done with that. But 6 to 8 people in their life, right? Their daily routine might only consist of a handful of people. And so the things that they're experiencing that are causing them anxiety, you look at their world, which is very small, and yours, which is much larger, and you think that's not something you should worry about. But to them, it's everything. So allow them that opportunity. And then certainly, I think I know I'm an advocate for it, and I'm certain that a lot of people have heard also the mind-body connection. And if we can give oftentimes, if our children don't have that ability through their words, if we can give them that physical outlet. I was just talking with Corey the other day about a breakthrough in a session I had with a client who, as long as we keep them moving and in motion, we are talking. And that mind-body connection is amazing and it's so healthy and I'm so happy for them. So if you have that opportunity, maybe try to explore that as well because those physical outlets sometimes are that breakthrough that they need to just get those feelings churning and get them out.
Yes, absolutely. So I'm going to spend just a minute kind of telling you a little bit about the different types of anxiety. So the first one is generalized anxiety disorder, and this is kind of the umbrella of anxiety. This is a very, very popular, probably the most popular form of anxiety because it's extremely generalized, hence the name, right? There's nothing specific about it. So this is a person who really has excessive and intense, prolonged anxiety, but it's not about maybe one particular thing. So, this is a person who just has really uncontrolled worry about a number of different things. This is a person who is restless, needs constant reassurance, but their worries last longer and for extended periods of time. They just the reassurance doesn't work, right? The worries don't go away. They have the somatic complaints, the physical ailments, and they're real. But we're talking about a person where it's lasting months and months and months. And so this is a person where they would meet criteria for generalized anxiety. This is also a person who asks a lot of what if questions. What if this happens? What if this happens? And when they're given reassurance, it doesn't matter, right? They just don't feel better about the responses that they're given. So again, I know that's a very brief kind of explanation, but we just wanted to kind of separate these five things just so that you kind of had just a brief kind of understanding. Separation anxiety disorder is very specific. It's an extreme distress when a child is separated from a caretaker, usually a parent, guardian, something like that. And a child shows distress even when they're anticipating a separation. So a child just has a very, very hard time being able to say goodbye. So this could be when they're getting ready to go to school. This could be when they're getting ready to go to daycare. It could be even something like a birthday party, right? Where a parent or caretaker has to stay at something like a birthday party. They're literally not able to leave them. A child with separation anxiety will have symptoms such as vomiting, hyperventilating, extreme rapid heart rate, sweating, trembling. They become extremely dysregulated at even the thought of their caretaker leaving them. And then when their caretaker does leave them, they are distressed for extended periods of time after their caretaker leaves them. Specific phobia is that there is an interference in a child's life anytime they encounter the thing that they are afraid of. So there's a couple different types of things that they can be afraid of, and I'm going to read them to you because I don't always remember them. But there's the different types are animals, such as dogs or bugs. And there's more, but that's just a couple examples. Natural environments, so they could be storms, heights, things like that. Blood injections or injuries, such as getting shots. We work with children who maybe have just different medical complexities going on where they have to get regular shots. So working with them on, understanding that, dealing with that pain that has to come with that. So they develop phobias around that. Situational types such as driving, small places, so those are the different types of phobias. So anytime they come into contact with that, they become extremely dysregulated. It's this really, really intense fear. Social anxiety is typically diagnosed between the ages of 8 and 15. It's a really intense, self-conscious fear of embarrassment in social situations. It's a fear of embarrassment about what's going to happen or what other people may think about them. Things such as, maybe they're going to wear, or even just a child raising their hand in school can cause a child extreme social anxiety. We work with kids who have had to leave public school and go to smaller schools, as well as even just drop out of public school and go to homeschooling because their social anxiety is so intense. And kids with social anxiety, there is a genuine terrified fear. Like it is absolutely terrifying to them, to be able to even ask a question. So it's not just like, oh, I'm nervous, about what this person's going to say. It is a genuine, genuine fear. And then the last one is a panic disorder. And a person who has a panic disorder is a person who struggles with reoccurring panic attacks. So a person has reoccurring panic attacks, and then in between panic attacks, they fear when their next panic attack is going to happen. So it's this constant thought about when their panic attack is going to happen. In between panic attacks, they are trembling, they're shaking, they're almost anticipating when this is going to happen again. Panic attacks, for those of you that have never experienced one, there is a lot of research that actually correlates it to an actual heart attack. It is extreme pain in your chest. It can radiate down your arms. People have actually ended up in emergency rooms for fear that they were having heart attacks, or I'm sorry, having a heart attack. And trouble breathing, hyperventilating, like I said. So that's kind of what a panic disorder looks like. So now we're going to go into some real examples of anxiety and kind of talk about the difference between that and worries. So one of the reasons that I'm really passionate about anxiety is because I was blessed with a 9-year-old daughter who has very, very extreme anxiety. So she was diagnosed with anxiety when she was 3, and she was diagnosed with separation anxiety at 3. And when she was diagnosed, she had separation anxiety. And it was to the point where we would put her in the car. And if someone was not in the car with her, when we buckled her into her car seat, she would instantly start vomiting in her car seat. And if she did not vomit, she would instantly start hyperventilating. So it was extremely difficult for us to be creative in ways to make sure that someone was always in the car with her so that she was not vomiting. And it took a very, very long time for her to be able to work through that. So that was when she was 3. So again, separation anxiety, she's literally vomiting every single time she gets in the car, because she couldn't see us, once we buckled her in the car to walk around the car to get back in to start driving, or kind of going wherever we needed to go. So kind of fast forward, now she's 9 and it's morphed into more of generalized anxiety. And things have, gradually gotten better, and she's doing, good in certain things. And we moved about 2 years ago, and now she's on different floors of our house, and the separation anxiety was doing so great. But now she won't sleep in her own room, and it's been about 2 years. And so we're noticing that separation anxiety is coming back. And so again, she refuses to sleep in her own room because she can't see us, and we're again on different floors. And she feels as though we can't hear her. So again, just kind of seeing some of those separation anxiety traits coming back out. So again, the biggest difference is that this is genuinely impacting her. She will not sleep. She has started to the point where she will hyperventilate. She doesn't vomit anymore, but she will hyperventilate to the point where she is inconsolable. So really, really impacting her on a daily basis. I have a young man that I have the privilege of working with who has some pretty extreme anxiety. And excuse me, he has really intense racing thoughts. And when working with him, he is able to verbalize with his family that his thoughts impact him when he is at school at home. And he will literally pace around at his house and he will verbalize to me and his family that if he is not able to tell his parents in the moment what he is thinking and feeling, he will become very, very irritable. He will even start swearing. He will start yelling. He will then, need to throw something across the table. He doesn't become violent, but it's almost like he kind of says it's like his skin is like crawling at him. So again, these are symptoms that it's interfering with his daily life. And this is something that he tells us is impacting him daily and has been impacting him for about 3 years now. So again, if you think back to the symptoms, or I'm sorry, the stories that I told you about the common worries, these were kids that after a short period of time, whether it was minutes or a couple of days, were able to kind of work through whatever it was that was going on. These kids that I'm giving you an example of right now, this is impacting their every movement of their day. They are literally not able to move past what is going on. And it's impacting on a regular basis that they just cannot move past what is going on with them. Ryan, is there anything you want to add to that?
I would say a couple things. I love Corey's example of and her willingness to share her real life example of that, because that is a great example of how it impacts her daughter's daily life, because she will be tired the next day because she couldn't rest. So her brain and her mind was racing, but also now her physical body is drained, which then in turn is going to just keep ping-ponging off of each other and intensify those worries. Um, I will deal with Corey's wrath about my phone ringing during the presentation here. I didn't even know a phone could ring on a computer, but I will say also it was kind of a timely call because I had forgot the young person that I talked to yesterday. I asked them to call me at their lunch today at school and just give me a check-in. They took it very seriously yesterday, and we can see that this is still on their mind because for a young, I know if you're my kids and I ask you to do something even 10 minutes from now, they forgot.
Yeah.
This young person is thinking about it today and has followed through. So I'm very grateful for that. But that goes to show you that these things aren't what we're talking about aren't fleeting thoughts. They're things that their children carry from day to day, and it's just constantly in the background of their mind. And so again, I think Corey's example was a wonderful one, but yes, definitely, I think that's what we're trying to get at is, we all go through tough times, the ebbs and flows of worries and just these momentary anxieties, but we do have examples and work with children all the time where, again, as Corey said, sometimes it takes them out of, what we would consider real life situations, going to school, which should be an enjoyable uh, situation and for most children. But if their worry is that where they can't get through the day, it's time to consult help.
Yeah.
What a segue. So that's what we're talking about. And when we say unrealistic, unrealistic is again, when we look at our littles and they're so dang just anxious about this little rumble of thunder that we're like, geez, oh Pete, you should see some of the bangers that I've seen and these thunder boomers that have gone on in my lifetime. To them, it's a big deal. And so it's not unrealistic. It's a very real point of worry for them. And Corey just said, and heard a couple of examples where if they just genuinely can articulate, I can't control this. There's nothing I can do. And I just, even I think one of the most profound things is when they are able to say, like, I want to be able to change my thoughts, but I just can't. That's indicative of this is beyond normal worries of their age, and it's gone into a point where they've lost control and they just need support. And we said it before, and we keep saying it. If it's persistent day after day, those somatic complaints and the physical ailments that we see, because, kids and even adults, generations before us weren't necessarily as willing or as equipped with information, outlets, and opportunities to talk about anxieties and worries. And so what happened? They develop heart issues and different ailments, different pains. And I'll just pitch the book The Body Keeps the Score for anybody out there who's curious about that, how worry and trauma and anxiety manifests in our bodies, and that applies to our children as well. And then I mentioned before, sometimes our children, when they seem to just be all in on these activities or these friend groups or anything. And then the next day they just seem to take this complete shift and it's out of nowhere. And you go, holy cow, I thought that was your favorite thing. And they go, no, I'm not really into it anymore. Okay, well, maybe it's time to ask a couple few questions, not pry, but give them that space to, yeah, can you tell me a little bit about that? I thought that was where you were going. And, I'm just curious, do you want to do something different? All kinds of questions that you can ask to kind of prompt them to get you to gauge, is this something I need to be concerned about or maybe seek some support for my child? Or is this just, nope, they just woke up and decided, no, I don't like doing that anymore. That happens. And then Corey mentioned before again, and I think that constant need for reassurance, but if it's just not hitting, if we can't seem to bring their mood up or get them to realize, oh, okay, I'm okay. This is normal. I'm gonna, do my best to get through this. If they just constantly need that reassurance and they're just not seeming to come out of it, we're looking for other opportunities at that point to get them, to break that pattern of thought and get them into a new mindset. And, consistency is key in most situations. And consistency in this case, if this is consistent and nothing's changing, this level of worry for our littles or our teens or whomever, and it's just not, we're not seeing an upward trajectory and we can't get it to budge, we're looking at additional support in that situation.
So we're almost done. Thanks for hanging in there. We're going to go into just some strategies that you guys can take. So one of the strategies that we use is called grounding. So what you can do is it's actually, the next slide actually kind of goes into that. So I'm gonna pause that for a second. But lots of breathing techniques. So one of the breathing techniques that I do is called just finger breathing or mountain breathing. And so we just use our hand and we just kind of breathe up the mountain and down the mountain and up the mountain and down the mountain. So you breathe in. And then you breathe out, and then you breathe in, and then you breathe out. And obviously, you want to go really slow. And then the belly breathing is we like to have kids lay down, and you have a stuffy on your belly, and you want to try to keep the stuffy on your belly without it falling off. And so you're breathing in and you're breathing out. These are just a couple of techniques to help. And I know we're, targeting a little bit younger kids for this one. Meditation, you can find so many things on Google, YouTube, kind of similar to what Ryan was talking about. We are huge, huge advocates for exercise, hobbies, but just being active. When kids are not active, we are seeing a major increase in symptoms. When kids are moving, keeping their bodies and minds being active, doing the things, we are genuinely seeing a decrease in symptoms. The grounding technique that I love is this. And we use this with all ages. So we say, what are 5 things that you can see? So if a kid is really struggling, we just like stop in the moment and we're like, name 5 things that you can see. And we do that and we do it with them. And then we say, what are 4 things you can feel? So we're looking for 4 different textures around us that we can feel. What are 3 things you can hear? So we're forcing the kid to be very, very present and very, very mindful in the moment. So they need to be present because if you're not sitting very, very still, you're not going to be able to hear 3 different things. two things that you can smell, and one thing that you can taste. And I know the last two are a little bit weird, and kids are like, Corey, that's so strange. Why are you making me smell things and taste things? But basically, what grounding means is we're trying to get a child or an adolescent to be very present. If a child is struggling with anxiety, their brain is like a hamster wheel. It is going and going and going. And we need that hamster to get off the wheel. That is like literally the phrase I use all the time for kids. And in order to do that, we need to be very present in the moment. And this is one of the most fantastic exercises to use. And I encourage even parents to use this exercise. So definitely use this. Here's just a little snapshot of some calming tools. Again, Google, YouTube, Etsy, all the things, right? There are so many resources out there, but we encourage parents, caregivers, teachers, everybody to have a huge list of resources, of things that just make you feel better. We really, really think that everybody needs them. And I really just encourage you to have them available. We want parents to have them visible so that kids see that it's normal. Because if kids see that parents are doing them, then they know that it's normal for them to be doing them as well.
Support is everywhere, but sometimes nowhere when you're in the moment. When we worry, our field of vision and awareness and all the senses just kind of just close off. But we want to remind you here that there are several outlets for you as caregivers that you can reach out to. First and foremost, we talked about the somatic symptoms, and certainly we want to rule out all the things. And so maybe a good start right away is if our littles or teens, for that matter, any of our children are experiencing physical ailments, let's rule out that they're sick. Period. Let's contact the doctor, and if all signs are a go that they're well physically, your doctor probably can even help you initiate maybe some further exploration into resources that can help now looking into their mental emotional well-being. And so pediatricians, general practitioners, they're your a great place to start. Our schools are becoming, thankfully, very much more equipped and aware of the challenges of childhood and adolescence. And so they are increasing, at least in my experience, I have seen, therapy dogs, which are great, school social workers and counselors on staff, not just counselors, the ones that, we know make the school schedules that our kids all complain about, but the ones who genuinely are there for just some debriefing. I know, Corey shared a personal experience, and I'll share one of my own that my kids have gone to Mount Pleasant schools their whole lives, and one of my children have spent a great deal of time needing just breaks, just a break, maybe a sensory overload or child, an interaction that they had is really just bothering them, and they just can't concentrate on what's going on in front of them. And they just need to go to the counselor's office and just chill out for a second on the beanbag or the hanging chair. That's been a wonderful support, and the communication has been fantastic. So they definitely, are there for you as well and are on your family side. And then I can vouch for this because I just thought it was so impressive in the moment. Here at Pleasant Psychology, Corey allowed me to observe an intake that she was conducting, in which I saw something that I would say from a business standpoint, you don't quite see often. But this shows, I think, the genuine level of care that attracted me certainly to working under this clinical leadership and with this population in this organization was, Corey had mentioned to this particular parent that, we might not be uh, adequate or appropriate for this situation. I want to give you several other resources, though, in case it doesn't match up and make you, I'll help you connect with those resources because that's what we want ultimately is you to have the best possible support, you and your child for that matter, to have the best and most appropriate support for your child's and your family's individual needs. And then your insurance companies also have a wealth of resources, which I personally had never thought of. I never thought to reach out to my insurance company because we usually try to avoid our insurance company. But we want to know certainly what's going to be paid for. And we want to know, you guys work with these folks. You have good reviews. You have a resource guide for me. And certainly, in most situations that I found, they do. So that's another option as well. And again, let's just hammer home the key points that we want. Worry is normal across the lifespan. Worry is normal for certainly our children, and it's totally normal to worry about your children. Persistent changes, things that last long and we just can't break out of, that's where we start to worry and we start to step in and provide additional supports. The one of the key, I'm sure maybe most of us have heard, but maybe not, adverse childhood experiences, traumatic experiences as a young person growing up, and how that plays out in our across our lifespan. That has serious effects. But one of the main protective factors in developing resilience across your entire life is I put parental support here, but actually, more accurately, is one caring, concerning adult to be there for our children, to give them space to express and feel like they matter and they have somebody in their corner. That's the number one protective factor for them to develop resilience across their entire life. And then I'm guilty of it. Actually, Corey and I, prior to starting this presentation, we're joking about, men. We always want to, we're just kind of clumsy and we want to fix things though and move on to the next thing because that's what we do. But, I'm very guilty of this. We don't always have to solve the problems in the moment. And I have tried and tried and tried with my children over the years to solve their problems because I'm hurting for them, just watching them hurt. I don't want them to be in that state, and I'm in pain, and we're all in pain, and I just want it to go away for everybody. I want to wave that magic wand, and it doesn't exist a lot of times. So we have to be okay sometimes with them just not being okay, knowing that we're there for them, but they're not okay right now. That's all right. It happens. We don't have to solve it. And fill your cup. Take care of yourself. Make sure that you are at your very best to be your very best for them. And know that reaching out for help, reaching out for support, advice, guidance, maybe it isn't at Pleasant Psych. Maybe we connect you with somebody else, a different agency, a different person, whatever the case is. It's not a sign of weakness or failure or any of the above things that our brains tell us that we're doing in that moment. It is a sign of concern out of your or for your child that is very appropriate and very much appreciated. And make sure, like we want our children to know, you are absolutely not alone. This is common, and that's why we feel it's important to talk about this and bring this information to you folks as well.
Absolutely. So lastly, we're just going to end with some resources for you guys. These are a list of books that we highly recommend, many of which I have personally read myself. So I really just encourage you to add them to your Amazon wish list. A couple of really, really great websites. I will tell you that at the bottom, the symptom checker is fantastic. So I'm going to give you a little clause on the symptom checker. So once you go to the symptom checker, um, you'll answer a bunch of questions about your child, and in big bold letters it will say, like, this is not a diagnostic thing, right? So it will help you kind of answer some questions, that sort of thing. But please know, that the internet is not a doctor, it's not a psychologist, it's not a therapist, whatever. But it can give you some maybe a pathway sort of thing. So please just know that. But it is a great, great resource to start with. It's just funny, we joke because as soon as you click on it, it's big bold letters like this is not liable for whatever. But please use these resources. These are fantastic resources. We give these resources to all of our parents when doing a psychological evaluation, or if we have a family come in and they're just like, we don't know what to do. Our kid is just really struggling with anxiety and we need to learn more about anxiety. This is kind of the page that we give them. So these are great resources that we stand by, and we would really encourage you to look at these. So I am going to stop sharing our slide. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. I definitely encourage you to keep paying attention to our website. We are going to be offering more and more of these lunch and learns. We're really excited about the feedback that we've been giving. And I just really appreciate you guys paying attention to Ryan and I today. Any last minute words from you, Ryan?
I would just echo exactly what you said, Corey, and definitely encourage everybody to keep, like Corey mentioned, an awareness of what's coming out because these tools are wonderful and these topics are so, so helpful for us as parents or caregivers to know, number one, there's help. Number two, you are not alone, and there's help at the literal click of a button or a pickup of the phone or just by gathering the information available here. So thank you to Corey, Dr. Chapman, Pleasant Psychology for allowing me to be a part, and thank you all for joining us today.
All right. Take care, guys.